Welcome back to Old School Sports and a new venture for us on this channel. This is going to be kind of a game review slash very basic tutorial on Front Office Football 9, which was released just a few days ago. Thanks for the heads up from Stanley Rosella on the fact that this game was released because this is a series that I thought was dead and finished. I think it was about 2.5 years ago that the programmer and leader of Solasismic Software, Jim Gindin, had posted that he had sold the source code and he thought it was incredibly unlikely that there would ever be a new version of Front Office Football 9. Apparently, something has changed on that front, and I'm pretty excited about it because, in my opinion, Front Office Football is the best game engine of any American football GM type simulation game that I have ever played. I've been playing this game for close to a quarter of a century. When I first found this game, I was single and in my 20s, never even had met my wife yet. Now I am much older than my 20s, and I have a couple of children who are teenagers. So I have been involved in front office football since the very early days. I have undoubtedly put thousands of hours into the game over the years. Only have a few hours into this new game, so this is going to be a bit of a very high level look on it. But I am a big fan of the series, a big fan of the programmer, and as I said, although there are some concerns that have been long standing with the user interface, it's not as modern and not as sleek as many games out there. In my opinion, the game engine, as I mentioned, the statistical accuracy of this game, attributes like drafting and trading and building your lineup and signing players and dealing with the salary cap are stronger in this game than in any other American football game that I've ever played. So I am really excited to do this review, dig into the game a little bit, and I'm even more excited to begin a series. I'm just going to start that series live in the coming days, not claiming that I'm an expert on Front Office Football 9 yet, since I'll be kind of learning the game live, or more accurately, on the internet with all of you who happen to stick around and watch. But as I mentioned, I've played probably 6 or 7 versions of this game previously. I've played some of the other games like their college football game, and have had some success with front office football in the past. The last version before this, I believe, came out in 2016, and I believe it was last updated a couple of years ago with new rosters. So really looking forward to jumping into Front Office Football 9, and I'm going to share some of my initial impressions with you in this brief tutorial slash review. So as I mentioned, I poked around in the game a little bit, but we're going to begin a new game just to maybe help those of you who are new to navigate these screens. When I start a new game, I want to use the front office football player file that uses the real NFL players, which is what I'm most interested in, rather than creating a fictional universe. Begin with players on the teams rather than doing some type of fantasy draft with those players is what I want to do as well. Use the default team assignments, which is the NFC and AFC structure that exists in real football today. Use historic quarterbacks is a new feature in the game where the best quarterbacks in a team's history can be put on the team. I guess if you're playing some type of fantasy game, that would be interesting. I'm not interested in that, so I have those unchecked. A few settings here. Use full X factor when creating ratings from player file. One of the interesting things about front office football that does make it somewhat replayable is that when you're starting a new season, the player ratings are not going to be exactly the same every time. If you use the full X factor, the variability among the player ratings will be even more extreme. Talking about the team that I am a fan of, the New York Jets, if you use the full X factor, I guess theoretically there's a chance that somebody like Zach Wilson might be ranked higher than Aaron Rodgers, although that's pretty unlikely. So I generally don't click this button. I want there to be some variability in how the players are rated, but I still want the good players from the NFL to generally be better than most of the poorer players. I am going to track to reveal scouting rated history. I'm not going to ignore economics when determining attendance. And those of you who have watched me before know that I love the general manager aspect of the game. So I have unclicked all of these boxes. I don't want my coaching staff to handle my depth charts, game plan, and playbook. Don't want my coaching staff to sign players when needed to fill the roster. And I don't want my coaching staff to handle the off-season functions and roster moves because that's the stuff that's most fun to me. Injury setting and combine accuracy both start at 100. These settings can go from either 0 or 1 up to 200. If it's 200, there's a ton of injuries. If it's down at the bottom, there would be very few injuries. 100 is, I believe, close to the level of injuries in football today, but I think it's tamped down a little bit. Combine accuracy, if you want to know exactly how every player is going to perform based on their combine results, you would crank that up to 200. If you want the combine to be a complete crapshoot, take that down to a low rating. I'm just keeping both of these at the initial settings since I don't want to tweak anything at this point since I'm very early in my experience with FOF9. And you can see the information about the settings that I just discussed right there. So our game is set up and ready to go. We're going to create a universe and jump right in. Choose a team to control. You can see that we've got the NFL here. And I am going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. Just saw them beat the Dallas Cowboys as Dallas imploded in those final seconds of a really good football game. And we are going to take a look at the Eagles roster for purposes of this introduction to Front Office Football 9. So we are going to click to begin the preseason, and now I'm just going to jump in and share some of the screens with you, share some of my impressions and experience from or past versions of the game, and also just highlight a couple of the quirks of the game that you're going to probably want to know about before you do purchase this and start playing. And just to be clear from the start, I strongly recommend this game. I've only spent a few hours with it at this point because I only purchased it a couple days ago when I found out that it was available. But as I mentioned, I am a big fan of this series, and as I've already said, I think this is the best GM-oriented football simulation engine out there that I have ever played with. So I give this game 2 thumbs up. I've, as I said, invested thousands of hours and hundreds of dollars in previous games in this series, and I will be jumping in and doing a playthrough that will begin shortly in this game to learn more about it and hopefully help you learn more about it and hopefully learn from some of the mistakes I made, and hopefully, since I have played it for a while, some of the good decisions I've made and the tricks that I've learned over time that are still applicable to the game. And if this is the first time that you've found our channel, would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, share some comments down below. We've tackled things like Out of the Park Baseball and Franchise Hockey Manager, as well as Tennis Manager in previous series. And there will be, as I mentioned, a Front Office Football 9 series coming up shortly. Do some tutorials on the game as well, and perhaps we'll be trying to do some tutorials on Front Office Football 9 going forward. The UI is the part of the game that has historically gotten the most criticism. There were negotiations several years ago between the developer of Front Office Football and the folks who work on Out of the Park Baseball and Franchise Hockey Manager to try to come some type of agreement to merge, and I think try to use this really good game engine that Jim has developed for Front Office Football with a more modern user interface that we've seen in games like Out of the Park Baseball. Unfortunately, that fell apart, so we are left with a game that is a great engine, as I said, but not the most modern interface. Buttons up here, new universe, we've just gone through that. Load a universe, simple enough. Save a universe, and global settings. But getting into the more interesting parts of the game, you can simulate a game by moving forward one day. Another option is to use this game drop down here, and you can run much further into the future if you want to sim very detailed action. You can go day by day. If you want to sim a bit more aggressively, there's options to do that as well. The Almanac has a bunch of league history information. This is not populated until the season begins. Doesn't have historical information, but over time, as you build a big universe, the Almanac and the statistics are very interesting. Team Almanac, similar. Not any data in here now, but 2023 going forward. There will be a long history of how your team and all of the other teams in the league perform. League overview, as you can see, we've got the 2023 National Football League set up here. We are the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of leader information and team statistics that will be available. I'm going to highlight a couple things that are quirks in the game, is perhaps the best way to describe them. The weather map, to me, is actually kind of interesting because weather can have a pretty big impact on how a football game is played. So that's going to be kind of an interesting thing to follow while playing the game. One thing that seems a bit quirky to me thus far is the fan support map. And there's just some interesting things that happen with this. This is all going to fill and build into the financials for the different teams. It's a really cool map here with different TV markets around, but there are some quirky things that I've seen in the versions that I've played. One example here would be, or multiple examples here would be the Philadelphia Phillies being the most popular team in Bangor, Maine, the Jets being the most popular team in Portland, Maine, Giants being the most popular team in Manchester, New Hampshire. There is just some quirky stuff. Even the Baltimore Ravens being the most popular team in central Pennsylvania between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. This is something that I think there's a algorithm that they've built that doesn't just always guarantee that the Giants are going to be number one and the Jets are going to be number two in New York. There's a little more variability to it than that. But when you see things like the Eagles being the primary team in terms of fan support in the Burlington, Vermont market, it is a little quirky. We'll see how that plays and feeds into the financial system. The Atlanta Falcons being the most popular team in Louisville, Kentucky is another interesting one. It is what it is. It's one of the quirks of the game, but we'll explore how it plays going forward. I wouldn't not buy the game because of that. There's also a detailed college report that shows you the history of all of the major colleges in the NFL. So a lot of interesting information on the league page. Big standings page, which obviously will be populated as teams start playing games. Exhibition season, they will have playoff projections and probabilities as teams move along. So a lot of interesting statistical information here. And then getting into the individual statistics, you can see that tons of different areas of statistics to filter on: season, regular season, playoffs, qualifiers only. You can look at players by different positions. You can look at all teams, look at only your team. Career information also available. So all of the statistical information that those of you who like playing these GM-oriented games would hope to see is going to be available in this game as you go forward. The team screen, this is where we were when we first came into this. You can see a highlight of your default starters across the team. And we'll get into some of these screens a little bit more. Roster, going to be one of the most interesting screens. You can see here with the Philadelphia Eagles, everyone has current ratings as well as future potential ratings. Not surprisingly, on a team like the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jason Kelce, some of the more highly rated and highly regarded offensive players, scrolling down to the defensive players. Similarly, no shocks with some of the higher rated players, Hassan Reddick, Darius Slay among them. As I mentioned, if you play with the full X Factor, or even if you don't play with the full X Factor, these numbers will vary from game to game. Seems like A.J. Brown is a 52 players, probably a little bit underrated this time around. I think, DeAndre Swift, as good a year as he's having, probably having a 79 rating as a running back on the 100 scale, might be a little bit high for him. But that variability is what makes the game interesting. And then when you click in on individual player pages, first I will start off with another one of the quirks in the game. This real estate up here on the top left is apparently the state flag for the home state of the player. Why that needs to be in the game, I can't say I understand. It's a little distracting to me. It's a little quirky. It's a little weird. But again, my recommendation based on my experience with this game is to not let some of the little quirks in this game get in the way of what is a fantastic game engine. You can see, looking at a quarterback, that there are a bunch of different ratings on Jalen Hurts. Overall rating, as we talked about, was what we saw on the previous page. He's 65 today. We think he could be a 74. The red bars and the first numbers are where we view the player as being today. The green bars are where, and the numbers on the right are where we think that player could improve over the course of his career. Chemistry is a new aspect in the game this year that I think will be very good. It seems like it's a bit random with how it's marked at the beginning of the game. I think it's a little unrealistic that quarterback as accomplished as Jalen Hurts has negative or strong negative chemistry with all of the players on his team. Again, I believe that that is something that just changes each time you play the game. So I think if we started this game up again and built a whole new universe, it's very positive that Hertz would have positive chemistry with some of these people. Quite honestly, if I was going to be playing as the Eagles and I opened this up and I saw this negative chemistry, quite honestly, I'd probably just start the game over and ensure that there wasn't something that quirky impacting my universe. Similar to the screen with Hertz, when you get into the running backs, we'll see that DeAndre Swift is apparently from some state with a black stallion on their state flag, and you can see that the ratings for a running back are mostly different than they would be for a quarterback. Still an overall score. You can see the positions that Swift is capable of playing. Some personality traits over here, which will influence how the player functions in the locker room, how the player functions while on the field and playing, and also will, in the cases of whether they're loyal or want a winner, can influence whether they'll re-sign with your team, how much they'll be looking for, whether they're going to be looking for greener pastures or a team that's more competitive than yours when they get close to hitting free agency. So, as I mentioned, the engine for this game in the background is really cool. You can also see the combine report for this player, and when we get into scouting new players, there will be combine reports on all of them, just to see how different things looking at offensive tackle Lane Johnson, ranked on running and pass block technique, blocking strength, scheme acquisition, endurance, overall ratings. You get the idea. The number of ratings and the salary information in this game, as well as the modeling of the different positions that people can play and how effectively they can play those positions, looks like it's as incredible as it's ever been. Darius Slay, one last player to look at, a defensive player. Cornerback, you can see not a particularly good pass rusher in terms of his technique or strength. Generally wouldn't expect that from a cornerback, but he excels at man-to-man defense, excels at diagnosing plays, pretty good endurance. He can even return a kickoff for you if you need. And there's just a ton of depth historically in terms of the ratings and how the ratings and all of the players on your team come together to build something interesting and play some games. And as I mentioned, I'm really looking forward to digging into this more and more. Moving on to another screen past the roster screen, and there's plenty of other stuff we could go into on all of these. Again, I'm just giving a brief summary for those of you who are interested in kind of seeing what some of these screens really look like. You can see your default quarterback, offensive line, and returners. You've got the ability to do a bunch of actions, ask the coordinators for a depth chart, which is already in there. Can erase the entire depth chart, and then you can kind of fill it in back by dragging and dropping players. If I wanted to start Mariota instead of Hurts, just drop him right there. But if I go back and ask the coordinators for the depth chart, obviously Jalen Hurts will be back in the starting lineup. Similar thing with all of your skill position players. You can look at all the skill position players again, and you can see the different personnel sets that you have an option at playing. When you see a player who is in red, it means that, as it says right here, the player may tire with expected usage. So that could be a sign that you don't necessarily want A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith out in just about every possible set that the Eagles will be playing with. If it's a little bit overwhelming on this page, you can also tab down and just look at your running backs, just look at your fullbacks, just look at your tight ends, wide receivers, etc. Similarly, on defense, can break up into the broader position groups. Your defensive front, which would include all of your linebackers and defensive linemen. You can do your secondary, your safeties, and your cornerbacks, obviously, and you can sort by much smaller groups as well. You can see that you've got the opportunity to set starting lineups, or more accurately, the lineups that you would use in different situations depending on what the other team is doing and what you want to do. You can always ask the coordinators for the depth charts there. And then special teams as well. Everybody has a special teams rating. Higher the better. You can see that Hassan Reddick is apparently an exceptional special teams player. But he's also a very important starting linebacker for us. So if we decided that we didn't want to use a player that's important to our defense in special teams, we could click here and discourage his usage in special teams. As you'll notice, quarterback's not even listed as an option to use on special teams, which is probably a good thing. Moving on to the next tab down, team schedule, simply enough, shows the schedule for the year, the exhibition games, and then the future schedule for the team. Manage is where a lot of things can happen. I can simulate one day, similar to the check mark up here. Manage is also where you go in to look at your playbook, and you can see that right now the Philadelphia Eagles have 200 plays, 44 run, 119 pass, and 37 that are RPO plays. Got a wide variety of plays here that they know. This is a game where you can simulate play-by-play, calling the specific plays that you're interested in if you want. I generally don't get into that level of detail, but there's also an opportunity for you to create different plays if you want for your team. So a ton of customizability here. This is admittedly, as those of you who have watched me play previous games know, an area that I haven't spent as much time with in the long time I have spent on front office football, simply because I'm more interested in the general manager aspects of the game. So I will generally default to letting my coaching staff develop the plays that they think is best for our team, and then make those calls during the games in most situations. But if this is something you're interested in, there is a ton to do there. Can also find a player here. This is where we start getting into some free agents. You can see apparently, and I think some of these free agents are fictional players at this point, so I'm not really going to go crazy signing any of them when I do begin my playthrough. I'm going to kind of go with the roster that I have and pare it down, but there are free agents out there. You can see there's a lot of interesting long snappers apparently, not any real high-end talent, or not too much high-end talent that's potentially out there. Although this rookie safety, Norman Rennie, who our scout thinks has 73 future potential. Looks like he could be someone pretty interesting. Don't know if he's a real player or not. It looks like he was first signed by the Cardinals. So maybe Norman Rennie is a real player. You can see he's from North Carolina. And he also went to college in North Carolina. I'm guessing if he is a free agent right now who's been cut by the Cardinals, in real life, he's probably not quite that highly regarded. But as I said, when you do play with this game, there is a bit of a fog of war and a bit of variability in the player ratings when you first start to make things a little more interesting. Acquisitions is the tab we're at now. Find a player. Salary cap kind of shows where the different teams are in terms of their estimated salary cap room. You can see there are a fair amount of teams that are pretty close up to the cap right now. And then you can also go to your trade headquarters here. Haven't spent a ton of time with this yet, but it's pretty simple again. If you're interested in trading away A.J. Brown, let's see if the Cleveland Browns are interested. And apparently they don't want a player with a heavily backloaded contract. So maybe with the money A.J. Brown is making, he's a little complicated to trade. Take a look at maybe someone who making a bit less money, but still, yeah, here we go. The tackle Driscoll. He may be more interesting because it looks like he's still on a rookie contract, a pretty highly regarded tackle. And opponent has Cleveland supposedly has interest in him, but they can't offer enough right now. Check out, are the 49ers interested in him? Yeah, the 49ers would give us a second rounder and a fourth rounder for Dak Driscoll. So there's a lot of back and forth with this. Again, I am in early stages of the game, but there are a lot of things that you can do to not just build the team through the draft and free agency, but try to get a little active in the trade market as well. The shopping cart tab here is for the draft. There's no information on the draft right now. The 2024 class will be revealed in the spring. So that gives you time to review the draft class before the draft actually takes place. There's mock drafts. There ultimately will be a draft history. So just a ton of data there. And then the last tab is just for your AI settings. I kind of talked through a lot of this stuff at the beginning of the game. And there's also an information help tab here, which will pull up a separate screen with a link to kind of a wiki type page with a lot of information, kind of the old game manual that those of us who are in our 40s or older remember from back in the day. A lot of the information that would have been in a paper game manual for this game 20 years ago is now available if you click through to the internet site where that is stored. And in addition to kind of navigating with these shortcut bars over here, can also use the different menus here, kind of talk through the game menu about moving the game forward. You can dig into your team and go back to that overview page, the roster page, review the coaching staff. To simplify things, you only have 5 coaches that you hire in front office football: head coach, both of your coordinators, an assistant coach, and a head trainer. Depth charts we've already spent some time with. Strategy, your game planning, defensive analysis, can do work on your opponents before the season starts. We're too late for it now, but before the preseason starts, you can give weight training assignments on the first day of training camp If there's a player who you think is a little heavy for their position, you can try to get them in better shape. If there's a player who's a little light, you can have them hit the weights and try to get a little stronger. As it says down here, weight training can allow your players to more closely match the ideal weight for a position. So that's something when you get into the second season, you have the opportunity to spend some time playing around with. Team schedule, team history, management overview, team playbook, and you can kind of see the pace of the year here, all of the games where we get going up through the playoffs, and then the beginning of the league year. If you want to build a new stadium, change your ticket prices, staff retention, draft class revealed, franchise players, free agency period, have to make decisions on your fifth year options for players that you picked in the first round of the draft 3 years earlier. The amateur draft, the late free agency period, summer vacation, weight training, as we talked about. Then you've got a deadline for your playbook, and then you get right into the exhibition season. So all of the highlights of the NFL year that dominate the sports landscape are available in this game. As I've said many times already in this episode, historically the game engine for this game is pretty good, and I'm really looking forward to digging in deeper and seeing what it looks like going forward. Amateur draft, not something that we'll see till next year. Team logo, you've got an opportunity to change the logos. I'm sure that there are people who are working on putting the real logos into a package that you could download, or I imagine there are, because there's a pretty active group. If you search out the various message boards for front office football, there's a lot of active people who have been playing this game for years. So you've got the ability to change those things. And then away from your team tab, as I mentioned, the league overview, the weather map, the metro areas, fan support, standing, scores, schedule, tons of statistics once you get going. The almanac, even more statistics and historical data. There's a top prospects report, which is interesting. Generally, rookie players, and then I believe second-year quarterbacks are also eligible for this list. So you see some of the top young players in the game when you go to that. Top salaries, obviously filled with the salaries that many of the top quarterbacks in the game are paid these days. There will be quarterback records going forward once you start generating statistics. Team cohesion is something that's really interesting, only available during the season. This is I guess a bit similar to that feature that I noted of whether players are getting along well and have good chemistry with one another. But team cohesion is something that's been in this game for many years that's pretty interesting. Essentially, if your secondary are all brand new guys, you brought in 3 free agents, you brought in 3 guys in the draft this year, made a trade for a guy who was on a different team, and you've got one guy who's a holdover from the previous season. All of the guys in your secondary are not going to play as effectively with one another as a team whose secondary has 7 guys who have been together for 3 or 4 seasons, and they're only trying to integrate 1 or 2 new players onto the team. So a lot of cool stuff with that does impact the game going forward. Snap counts, average age. You can see who the veteran teams are in the league, who the young teams are. Not surprisingly, the Jets, one of the older teams, and the Green Bay Packers, one of the younger teams after Aaron Rodgers moved from Green Bay to the Jets this past offseason. Continuing on with the league tab, also a ton of different financial information as you get going. Franchise value report is something that I think is new this year. be interested in seeing what that looks like over time. They've also got player jersey sales now. Patrick Mahomes sold the most jerseys this year, apparently tied with DeMarcus Lawrence, just ahead of Dak Prescott, as the Cowboys remain very popular. Haven't gotten into the financial engine incredibly deeply yet, but there is a profit and loss report for each team. Team stadium report. You can see how old the various stadiums are. You may remember that there was a time for stadium moves in the calendar. If you were a team that was playing in an older stadium or a smaller stadium without a lot of luxury boxes, you can put it to a vote in your city whether they will build you a new stadium or not. And if that vote fails and they decide not to build you a new stadium, then you do have the option to move your franchise to another city. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do from that perspective. Ticket sales, as I mentioned, there's a date each year when you can change your ticket prices from everything from a luxury box back to upper deck seating in your stadium. Where you set the ticket prices compared to the strength and the size of the market that you are in and the success of your team is going to influence how your team ultimately does financially. Franchise players, is something that will kick in with next year after we've played a full season. So navigating is something that takes a little bit of time to get used to. But as I said, this game is about the game engine rather than the user interface. The user interface is a little bit dated. It's a little hard to get used to. Once you get used to it, it works really well. But there are a few quirks. One final quirk that I do want to just show as the Eagles get ready for their first regular season game in a couple of weeks. They're going to have to pare that 72-man roster down to a 60-man roster. I would love to be able to just kind of right-click on the player and click release for the guys that I don't want. Rick Lovato, who we think is a 3 current and 3 potential player, seems like he might be an obvious guy to cut, although he is our only long snapper right now, so perhaps we wouldn't want to cut him. But Roderick Johnson, a left tackle who doesn't look like he is particularly well regarded, or Julian Good-Jones, rookie undrafted left guard. Those may be guys to look at moving on from at some point. Again, it would be nice if you could just kind of right click and release them. Unfortunately, you have to go into the individual player card and then click on this action to release a player, change their position. You can change their uniform number or name. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and release him. It will let you know if you have a player with a guaranteed contract that you're trying to release, how much of their bonus will impact your cap this year and next year. If you start getting into a position where you've got a veteran player who got a big contract that they haven't lived up to and you try to cut them, you have to deal with the realities that you deal with in the real life of the NFL, where there can be some pretty significant salary cap ramifications if you do that. But we'll go ahead and release Julian Good-Jones. Just to make the point, though, we'll take a look at a player who should be pretty highly paid, I would think, in the case of Lane Johnson. His contract ends at the beginning of 2028. You can see if we were to try to release Lane Johnson, we would save $1.17 million, but his contract would count $13.5 million against this year's cap, and then 63 plus million against next year's cap after he was just recently re-signed, apparently. So there's a lot of bonus money that he's been paid that hasn't been properly amortized. So clearly we do not want to release Lane Johnson because he is a great offensive tackle, but we also don't want to deal with those awful salary cap ramifications. So the level of realism as far as the salary and free agency and the draft and just the way all of the different players are modeled is incredibly interesting in this game. So if you haven't guessed, I will reiterate that I am a big fan of this series, and I'm really looking to digging into this new version and starting a playthrough, which I'll be doing in relatively short order. As I dig into that playthrough, we'll certainly be sharing more opinions on the game. I'm sure I will find some more things I like and some more things I don't like. But ultimately, I am a guy who loves this series, loves the game engine, loves the immersion in the general manager portion of this game, the realistic statistics that it generates, and the interesting aspects of building a franchise over time, trading away draft picks, signing your players to extensions, figuring out who you want to put the franchise tag on if you can't get an agreement with them to at least keep them one more year. I think it's a great game. I'm willing to deal with the little quirks like state flags having a prominent position on the front page, as well as some of the other little things like the fan support map perhaps not being as I guess honestly as rigid as I would like it to be. I would kind of want the New England Patriots to be the top team in most of New England almost all the time. I think historically there are pockets of New England where there are some New York Giants fans. I think mostly it's the older fans from before there was the AFL, people in their 60s and 70s who grew up kind of watching the Giants before the Boston/New England Patriots were around. So to see things, as I mentioned, like Philadelphia or the Jets being the top teams in some of the markets in New England is a little quirky and a little unrealistic to me. But when all is said and done, there's generally a couple of quirky things like that in each version of this game. I'm sure over time and playing the game, I'll figure out whether it really has a significant impact on the finances or not. But, the fact that there's not the real logos, the fact that there's state flags on the player pages, the fact that some of the market information for the TV markets is a little quirky is not enough for me to not recommend this game. The depth of the ratings, and as I've said many times now, the quality of the game engine and the draft engine and the free agency engine and just the various aspects of team building in this game is why it is a series that, as I mentioned, I've spent thousands of hours playing over the years, and I'm looking forward to putting a lot of time into this new version of the game. So as I dig deeper, I'm sure I'll share more thoughts on the game, but for those of you who are wondering a little more than you can get from just a couple of screenshots on Steam, or wondering a little more than a generic review that you may have read online and kind of wanted to see a few more details about what the game looks like and what the different navigation looks like. Hope this was helpful. Again, if you are new to the channel, would really appreciate it if you subscribe, like the videos, and hopefully when we do begin a series playing through in Front Office Football 9, hope you'll join us and watch that. Share your thoughts on what I could do better, what I'm doing well, and most importantly, what you are learning as you're playing the game. So we will be out with a Front Office Football 9 playthrough in the coming days. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.